The day I was born, my dad broke his leg in an accident at his construction site. A respected village elder declared I was a jinx, a curse on our family. A woman in the same maternity ward, who had just lost her own daughter during a difficult birth, adopted me just before my mother could smother me. When I was born, the country still had a one-child policy. When my parents saw I was a girl, they started plotting how to quietly suffocate me. A girl, my father sneered. She can't carry on the family name. My father looked at me like I was his enemy. My mother refused to breastfeed me, afraid it would delay her next pregnancy. She and my grandmother even discussed where to bury me so I wouldn't be found. That afternoon, my dad broke his leg in an accident at the construction site. The family was hit with huge medical bills. Without the money, he'd be crippled for life. Hearing the news, my mother pinched my swaddled body until I was black and blue. Then she slapped me twice across the face hard. My skull, still soft, immediately caved in. For a long time after, my head was flat on one side. The doctor said it might never round out. You little jinx. You brought disaster on this family the second you were born. You worthless little brat. I didn't understand anything. I just wailed. But the more I cried, the harder she hit me, screaming at the money pit to shut up. My grandmother stood by, holding a burlap sack, ready to stuff me inside and dump me in the mountains behind the village. The woman in the next room had lost her baby in childbirth and might never be able to have another. She saw what was happening and, dragging her weak, post-delivery body over, she snatched me from my mother's arms, saying she would raise me. How could you be so cruel to such a beautiful baby? Her body was frail, but her arms held me tight. A newborn, I felt the warmth of a loving embrace for the first time through the thin swaddling cloth, and I stopped crying. She's my baby. I carried her for 10 months. If you want her, you have to pay. For my nutrition, the hospital bills, the medical costs, you pay for it all. $3,000, and the little brat is yours. Back then, $3,000 was an absolute fortune. An ordinary worker only made a few dozen dollars a month. $3,000. Fine. I'll pay it. From the moment the woman held me, she couldn't seem to let go. She grit her teeth and agreed to the deal. Later, my birth mother consulted that respected village elder, who confirmed I was a jinx, bad luck to anyone who came near me. This made her even more thrilled with her decisive action in getting rid of me. She used the $3,000 to pay for my father's leg surgery. With the leftover money, my birth mother even started a small business. Not 2 months after selling me, she was pregnant again. The next year, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The whole family was overjoyed, and even my biological father's business started to pick up. They eventually moved to the nearby town and became one of those rich families everyone in the village envied. My biological brother was spoiled rotten by my birth parents and grandparents. They called him their lucky star, sent to bless them. And every time they called him their lucky star, they'd add a comment about me, the jinx. Slowly, the story spread. Soon, everyone in our village and the surrounding towns knew I was a jinx. The girl who had crippled her own father at birth. And the woman who insisted on adopting me, Anna, ended up divorcing her husband and being scorned by the villagers. She's not right in the head, they'd say. Throwing away a good life. Practically begging to bring a curse into her home. That $3,000 was her entire dowry, plus every penny she had saved in the 2 years since she'd been married. After paying for me, Anna had to leave her marriage with nothing. Even her own family didn't understand and cut off all contact with her. She moved with me into a small, long-abandoned cottage in the countryside. This just gave the gossips more fuel for the fire. They said the little jinx had not only caused her adoptive mother's divorce and homelessness, but had also turned her own parents against her. This was the world I grew up in. The village kids threw rocks at me. Even the village idiot would spit at me and call me jinx. But my mom, Anna, treated me like her own flesh and blood, like the most precious treasure in the world. In the end, my head didn't stay flat. When I got older and tied my hair in pigtails, it was perfectly round. Even the doctor called it a miracle. But it wasn't a miracle. Night after night, through the dead of winter, my mom would gently cup my tiny head in her hands, slowly coaxing my soft skull back into its proper shape. My mom had no one to care for her during her postpartum recovery, so she didn't produce much milk. She learned massage techniques from a village woman who'd had 2 kids and forced her milk to come in. The first time I drank her milk, my mom smiled through tears. She's eating, she whispered. Now she'll live. While still recovering from childbirth, she did needlework to earn money, all while nursing me. Because she never rested properly, her eyesight began to fail. The villagers started whispering again that I was the reason my adoptive mother was going blind. But this time, she overheard them. She put her hands on her hips and yelled right back, "I'm raising my daughter. Is she costing you a dime?" After that, the gossip died down, but few people in the village got close to us. It was as if I was determined to defy fate from the start. When her thin milk wasn't enough and we had no money for more, Mom fed me cornmeal mush. But by the time I was 2, I had never once been sick. I was chubby and looked healthier and taller than other kids my age. When I turned 2, Mom weaned me. She used what little money she'd saved to buy a small pushcart and started selling candied fruit skewers around the neighborhoods. Our lives slowly started to get better. Under the cart, she kept a blanket, a pillow, and a little cloth doll she'd found in a trash heap. That little cart, with the sweet-smelling bottom of the candy pot, was my entire childhood. My mom would often hold me and say, "I have never, ever regretted taking you in. You are the brightest star in my life." Because of all the gossip, I knew from a young age that I was adopted. I even felt like I had ruined my mom's life. So I made a promise to myself. When I grew up, I would do everything I could to repay her. When I was 4, something big happened in town. My mom's ex-husband, the man who would have been my adoptive father, murdered someone. He murdered his new wife. My mom told me that not long after their divorce, the man remarried. Things were fine at first, until his new wife gave birth to a girl. He and his parents started beating and cursing the woman. They even sold her baby to human traffickers. After that, his wife lost her mind. With no family to protect her, she was beaten constantly. They even tied her up in the pigsty and forced her to eat pig slop. Then one night, the man came home drunk and beat her so badly that he killed her. When the police came to arrest him, my mom and I were in the crowd watching. I felt her hand grip mine tighter and tighter. It was hot and slick with sweat. Afterwards, she rushed me home, and the moment we were inside, she pulled me into a fierce hug. "Grace, you're not a jinx at all. You're my lucky star." It turned out that when my mom had her difficult labor, she had also given birth to a girl, but the baby was stillborn. She said that in that moment, the way her husband and in-laws, who had always been decent to her, looked at her changed. They muttered about how she'd brought them bad luck by delivering a dead girl. That's why no one stopped her, a woman who had just given birth, from walking out of her room and over to mine. From the moment they saw she'd had a daughter, a dead one at that, they stopped treating her like a human being. After she adopted me and broke with them, they were the ones who spread all the vicious rumors about us in the village. Over the years, Mom had heard bits and pieces of gossip about her ex-husband's family, but had tried to stay out of it. Now she realized she had narrowly escaped a terrible fate. "Grace, if it weren't for you, the one who'd be dead right now, it might have been me." My mom called me her treasure, but my real name was Grace. In our local dialect, her nickname for me meant treasure. She always told me I was her greatest treasure. When I was 6, my mom took me into the city for the first time. She said my uncle was getting married. Since adopting me, Mom hadn't had any contact with her family, but my uncle had sent an invitation, and she was so excited she couldn't sleep all night. She couldn't stop telling me what a great guy my uncle was, how he'd gone to college, gotten a good job in the city, and found a beautiful wife. "Grace, what do you think? Does this look good on me?" She had bought a new dress just for the occasion and stood in front of the mirror, turning this way and that. I had never seen my mom wear a dress before. Watching her now, in a dusty rose-colored dress, her face glowing in the mirror, I remembered she was only in her 20s. The next day, we got all dressed up and went to the little noodle shop in the village for lunch before heading to the city for the wedding. But as soon as we walked in, someone spat on the floor right at my mom's feet. My mom's brow furrowed. It was Mrs. Gable, one of the biggest gossips in the village. Mrs. Gable was a distant relative of my biological father, and deeply superstitious. She was always spreading nasty rumors about me. "I'm not about to eat with your daughter," Mrs. Gable said, though she made no move to get up. My mom shot back a curse, and the two of them only stopped bickering when someone else pulled them apart, and our noodles arrived. But for some reason, the smell of green onions in the noodles today made me feel sick. I didn't want to cause any trouble for Mom, so I tried to hold it in. But then a breeze blew the scent right into my nose, and I couldn't stop myself. I clamped my hand over my mouth, but it was too late. Ugh, the other people in the diner started complaining about how disgusting I was. Mrs. Gable fanned the flames. "Oh, honestly, people are trying to eat. How repulsive. Just what you'd expect from a worthless little stray." There were 7 or 8 people in the diner, and not one of them cared how I was feeling. They all just chimed in with their disgust. My mom was about to lunge at Mrs. Gable, but I tugged on her sleeve. Tears welled up in my eyes. "Mom, I think I'm going to be sick again. Can we just go?" And so we left without even finishing our meal. The owner was friendly with Mrs. Gable and claiming I'd made a mess of his shop. He even charged my mom a cleaning fee. I clenched my fists, feeling like maybe I really was just a burden, a jinx. Suddenly, my mom knelt down and gently cupped my face. "It's okay, Grace. We'll go home and eat. Come on, I'll carry you." But we had been out of the diner for less than 2 minutes when a massive boom erupted behind us. My mom and I turned around in a daze. The diner, perfectly fine just moments ago, was on fire. The gas tank exploded. "Somebody help!" a man screamed from the street. The words had barely left his mouth when another boom shook the ground, and the building collapsed. Through the flames, I thought I saw a woman in a floral blouse, desperately reaching out, begging for help. In that instant, she saw me, her eyes wide with disbelief. Then the fire swallowed her whole. It was Mrs. Gable. It was too late for a rescue. The building burned to an empty frame in minutes. We all knew the people inside were gone. Our village was remote, and the small restaurant kept 5 or 6 spare propane tanks on hand. When we left, both my mom and I had noticed the door was busted and hard to open, which must have cut off any chance of escape for the people inside. My mom pulled me into a hug, her eyes glazed over. "Grace, you're a miracle." If I hadn't felt sick and insisted on leaving, we would have been in that fire too. The whole village came out to fight the fire. The air was filled with wails and cries. My mom and I helped carry buckets of water to throw on the flames from a distance. We were a mess by the end of it, our new clothes dirty and our hair wild. But neither of us complained. After all, we had escaped with our lives. The people in the diner, however, would never get out. Their bodies were likely burned to ash. In our village, that was the most tragic way to die. With no body for the grave, they would have to bury empty coffins. In those days, there was no bus service between the village and the city. Because of the fire, the family that was supposed to give us a ride canceled their trip. My mom and I waited for 2 hours before we found an ox cart heading out of the village. The ride was silent. I could only feel my mom's hand clutching mine, her palm sweaty and trembling slightly. When we got to the city, Mom first found a place to clean us up before we headed to the hotel. But the banquet was already over. Almost everyone had left. We were too late. And even though we'd tried to tidy up, we still looked disheveled and grimy. As soon as we stepped into the lavish hotel lobby, a waiter walked over and waved us away. "Beggars out. There are no leftovers here." It was my uncle's wedding day, and we were already late. My mom didn't want to cause a scene, so she smiled apologetically. "The family that held the wedding reception here, where are they?" "I'm his sister, his older sister." The waiter looked us up and down, then sneered. "That's Principal Lou's son-in-law. You his sister? Get out of here, stop making things up." Our clothes had clearly given him the wrong impression. But my mom didn't want to miss the chance to see her family. She explained patiently while craning her neck, searching for her relatives. But the waiter just shoved her. "Looking for a backdoor favor from Principal Lou, are you? Stop looking. They just announced at the reception that the groom is an only child. He doesn't have a sister." Hearing this, my mom froze. But then, as if she understood, she took my hand and led me out of the hotel. On the street, my mom started to cry. That's when I learned that my mom had never been her parents' favorite. Her given name was Xiaodi, which meant beckon for a little brother, because after she was born, my grandparents still wanted a boy. My mom stroked my head. Grace, it's hard being born a woman. But I will never let you suffer the way I did. But my mom still wanted to catch one more glimpse of her family. I could see the sadness in her eyes, so I pointed to a low building nearby. Mom, we can go up there. We can see the hotel entrance from there. That way, when my grandparents came out, she could see them from a distance. Grace, you're so smart. We climbed the stairs of the low building, planning to watch for my mom's family. But as soon as we got to the top, we saw a chubby girl standing on the roof. Her feet were on the ledge, as if she was about to jump. Mom, what is that person doing? I asked, pointing at the roof. My mom gasped, immediately set me down, and rushed up the last few steps. Honey, whatever's wrong, please come down first, she said, her voice trembling. It's windy up here, it's dangerous. The girl looked about 5 or 6 years older than me. She was wearing a cute tutu-style dress, her face streaked with tears. When she saw my mom, instead of coming down, she took a step back, leaving only a few inches between her and the edge. My mom froze, then softly asked what was wrong. It turned out the girl was being bullied by her classmates because she was chubby and had worn a dress she loved to the party. They all called me fat, said I shouldn't wear dresses. They said I was ugly, that I looked like a pig in a tutu. But I really love this dress. The girl was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe, and she was unsteady on the ledge. It looked like she could fall at any second. I looked at her and felt confused. I had always been chubby, and my mom loved dressing me in skirts. Why did everyone say I was cute, but they called this girl ugly? You look really pretty. You look nicer in that dress than I do. I'm chubby too, but I don't look as pretty as you in a dress. Don't listen to them. I don't know where the courage came from, but I walked right up, took the girl's hand, and spoke from the heart. My words were genuine, and my eyes were clear and earnest. Maybe because I was just a little kid, the girl didn't seem wary of me at all. Please come down. My mommy says you shouldn't stand up so high, it's dangerous. With that, I gently pulled the girl back from the edge of the roof. The exact moment I pulled her back, the stone slab she had been standing on came loose. A huge chunk of stone tumbled down, making my hair stand on end. If I hadn't moved just now, would I have fallen? The girl stammered, terrified. My mom spent a long time comforting her on the roof, even pointing to my double chin as an example. It's good for kids to be a little chubby. It's a healthy kind of beautiful. If people are mean to you, you be mean right back. Don't let them get to you. If you had jumped, think how heartbroken your parents would be. And if you had stood there a second longer, that ledge would have collapsed, and it would have been too late. The girl seemed to realize she'd been wrong. Her eyes flickered at the mention of her parents, and she nodded slightly. She hugged me tight. Thank you, little sister. I was so scared just now. Just then we heard anxious shouts from below. Becca! Becca! The girl ran off, thanking us one last time before she left. At that moment, I saw a group of people coming out of the hotel, and asked my mom if that was my grandma and grandpa. My mom immediately stood up, her eyes lighting up. In the end, my mom couldn't bring herself to go up and talk to my grandparents. She just watched for a while, and then we prepared to leave. But as we were coming down from the building to cross the street for the bus, someone grabbed her arm. Principal Liu, someone was just here impersonating your son-in-law's sister. Do you think we should call the police? It was the waiter, shouting loudly and drawing everyone's attention. After he finished, he looked at the crowd obsequiously. Principal Liu, I was just doing my civic duty, you see. About my niece's expulsion. An older couple in formal suits looked over and spotted my mom instantly. The white-haired woman's eyebrows knitted together. Xiaodi? You came here dressed like that, with that little burden? Are you trying to embarrass our family? I told your brother you have nothing to do with us anymore. He didn't need to invite you to his wedding. How did you even find this place? What is life so bad you regret everything? You came back to beg for our forgiveness. The old woman's 3 questions hit like daggers. My mom's face went white. It was only then that I realized my grandparents had never intended to invite my mom to the wedding at all. It was my new aunt who had insisted on sending the invitation. "We're leaving. We'll go now," my mom said, her voice tight. She squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes, and turned to leave. I hung my head, not daring to say a word. I was 4, and I understood enough to know that I was the reason my mom's relationship with her family was so broken. She had lost them when she divorced her husband to adopt me. Just then, a small figure rushed out from the crowd and grabbed my sleeve. "Mom, Dad, they're the ones who just saved me." And in that instant, my grandparents, who had been scowling, suddenly changed their tune completely. "Oh my, isn't this Mr. Chen's daughter, Becca? Where did you run off to?" The little girl my mom and I had just saved was the daughter of a very powerful businessman in the city. He was so powerful that even my aunt's family, who were quite respectable themselves, had to look up to him. He was even a major donor to Principal Liu's school. When Mrs. Chen found out that my mom and I had saved her daughter, she grabbed my mom's hands tightly. "I heard everything from Becca. Thank you so much." When Mrs. Chen presented my mom with a thick stack of cash as a thank you, my mom and I were stunned. "Mrs. Chen, you don't have to really," my mom said. Her face flushed as she tried to refuse. But Mrs. Chen insisted on pressing the money into my mom's hands. "If it weren't for you, our Becca." My grandparents stared, dumbfounded. Even my aunt and uncle's family, who had arrived by then, kept saying how my mom and I were blessed for our kindness, and that we should accept the reward. By the time my mom and I got back to the village, we felt like we were floating on air. How did a trip to the city end with us getting $10,000? That was $10,000. In those days, that kind of money could do anything. Some families worked their fingers to the bone all year and barely made $1,000. "Grace, we're going to have a good life now," my mom whispered happily in my ear. She was already planning how to use the money to start a small business. Listening to her, I felt a thrill of excitement, like our good life was really about to begin. Mom wouldn't have to push that heavy cart around to sell candied fruit anymore. But the next day, $8,000 of that money was stolen from us. The thieves were none other than my biological parents. It turned out that after they moved to the city, my biological father's business had gone downhill, and he'd been swindled out of a lot of money. They were already struggling when my spoiled biological brother got into a fight at preschool and blinded another child. The other family demanded a huge sum in compensation, threatening to have them sent to jail if they didn't pay. Our town wasn't that big, and word of what happened at the hotel yesterday had quickly reached their ears. They stormed into our village the next morning, kicked down our front door, and pointed a finger in my mom's face. "You shameless woman. It was my daughter who saved the official's kid, so that money belongs to us, her real parents. If you don't hand it over today, we'll tear this place apart and sell that little animal." They were bullying us because we were a widow and an orphan with no one to stand up for us. Staring at these two strangers who were supposed to be my parents, I hid behind my mom, tears stinging my eyes. There were things I was too young to understand, but I knew I didn't want parents like them. My mom shielded me fiercely, but they kept shouting, threatening to get a DNA test and take us to court. That's when I learned that although my mom had paid for me and registered me under her name, she had never gone through the official adoption process because she didn't know the law. In the end, to keep me safe and make them go away, my mom took out $8,000 and threw it in their faces. "Take the money, get the paperwork done, and never come near my Grace again." And with that, the greedy couple left with the $8,000. At a lawyer's office, they signed an agreement with my mom, finally completing the legal adoption. In those days, the adoption process was simpler. So after the initial $3,000 at birth, I had now cost my mom another $8,000. Even at 4 years old, I wondered, how would I ever earn that much money back to repay my mom? Before I could figure it out, my mom suddenly grabbed me in a hug the next day. "Grace, you'll never guess what happened." She said something had happened, but her expression was one of grim satisfaction. My biological father had been in a car accident. This time, he had injured the same leg he'd hurt years ago, but now it was a compound fracture. He had been on his way with the $8,000 to settle the trouble his son had caused. That's when he was hit by a car. The doctor said that to fix his leg properly, it would cost exactly $8,000. After some debate, My biological parents gave the money to the family of the child my brother had blinded to keep their son out of trouble. My biological father was left to suffer. I heard he was bedridden for months and even developed bed sores. By the time he could walk again, he had a severe limp. He was not yet 30 but looked like an old man of 60 or 70. When people can no longer provide for others, conflict is inevitable. My biological parents fought constantly. One time, during an argument, my drunk biological father slapped my biological mother so hard that a lump formed on her head that never went down. Meanwhile, my mom took the remaining $2,000 and started a roasted nuts and seeds business. She was a skilled cook and a hard worker, and it wasn't long before she had her own little shop. By the time I was in high school, my mom owned 2 chain stores in the city. Everyone in the city knew Anna's gourmet snacks. They'd give a thumbs up and say, especially those candied fruit skewers. One bite just makes you happy. Once my mom became successful, she could hold her head high and reconnect with my grandparents. The families started visiting each other more often, even celebrating holidays together. I always thought it was because my mom had become such a strong, successful woman that my grandparents finally looked at her with respect. But one day my mom told me, "Your grandparents are willing to see me because of your relationship with the Chun family." I'm not naive about it. But they raised me, so giving them gifts and being able to talk to them every year puts my heart at ease. In this world, my Grace will always be the one closest to my heart. Becca Chun and I became best friends. Even though she was 5 or 6 years older than me, she loved hanging out with me. She especially loved buying me little dresses and pinching my chubby cheeks. "This little chubby face just screams good fortune," she would always say. But every time she said it, I would think about the $11,000 I had cost my mom. So all through high school, I was an excellent student. It was like a string was pulled taut inside me, reminding me constantly, you have to study hard, make a lot of money, earn back that $11,000, and take good care of your mom. The year I turned 18, a senior in high school, I was tall and striking. My biological parents weren't tall, but I had shot up to 5'8". I didn't get acne during puberty, and as my baby fat melted away, my features became more defined. Becca was about to graduate from college, but still loved pinching my cheeks. Now though, she would say, "Grace, how did you get a face like that? How are you so beautiful?" Becca was the type who gained weight just by drinking water, so she was still chubby in college. But she was no longer insecure about her body like when she was a kid. When I was in 6th grade, my mom and I moved to the city. Becca and I started spending a lot of time together, doing our homework and hanging out. As Mrs. Chun put it, ever since my daughter started playing with Grace, she's gotten so serious about her studies. She's really coming into her own. Maybe it was my childhood mission. I have to earn back $11,000 for my mom. That drove me, like something was always chasing me, never letting me slack off. I even managed to pull Becca along with my intensity. By my senior year of high school, Becca was already doing her college internship. She landed a position at a publicly traded company in Houston, thanks to her excellent grades, making all her classmates envious. She also had boys asking her out. When she asked one of them what he liked about her, he said, "Becca, you're so beautiful when you're hardworking and confident." That weekend, Becca came to my school and pulled me out of class. The moment she saw me, she threw her arms around me. "Grace, thank you. If you and your mom hadn't stopped me that day, if you hadn't pushed me to study with you all these years, even if I hadn't died, I would have just been a self-conscious, fat little girl." That same year, Becca insisted on signing me up for a teen model competition. I didn't want to do it at first, but then I saw that the grand prize was $11,000. My eyes lit up instantly. Senior year was busy, so I secretly practiced my runway walk at home for over a week, fueled by the conviction that I must win that $11,000. The day after my final exams, feeling pretty good about my performance, my mom got a call from the competition organizers. "What? My daughter entered a teen model competition and won first place? And the prize is $11,000. My mom laughed. "You must be a scammer." The summer after my senior year, while my classmates were traveling, playing video games, and dating, I was dragging my mom to the hospital. There was no way my mom would accept the $11,000. She said I had earned it, so I should keep it. But I had noticed that my mom's eyesight had been getting worse over the years. The damage from doing needlework while recovering from childbirth, combined with her age, meant her eyes were becoming sensitive to light, and she couldn't see well at night. She was always so nonchalant and never took it seriously, but I was determined to use that money to get her eyes treated. We already had 2 shops and a house in the city, but my mom lived very frugally. At night, she would often sit on her bed counting the day's earnings, smiling from ear to ear. This is all for Grace's dowry. Because of this, she had seen a doctor a few times over the years, but had never stuck with a treatment plan. This time, with my exams over, I was going to make sure my mom's eyes got fixed. I made an appointment for her and insisted on taking her to the hospital several times. She finally promised she would be a good girl and follow the treatment, which put my mind at ease. But then I noticed, my mom started going to the hospital every day on her own. She even asked me to watch the shops, which she normally treasured. Until one day, I saw Dr. Miller, her eye doctor, walking her home. That's when I realized my mom was in love. People married young back then. My mom was only 19 when she married her ex-husband and 20 when she divorced him after her traumatic childbirth. When I turned 18, she was only 38. But years of hard work had made her look a bit older. That summer, though, she was glowing every day. She even started wearing the long dresses she hadn't touched in years. When she twirled in the living room, her skirt flared out like a magenta morning glory. "Grace, don't I look pretty?" I walked over and hugged her. "Mom, you're the prettiest." That year, I got into a top-tier university to study education. I never forgot what my mom told me when I was little. "Grace, it's hard being born a woman, but I will never let you suffer the way I did." From that moment on, I knew that when I grew up, I wanted to teach in underserved and impoverished areas, places where boys were favored over girls. I wanted to lead by example. I wanted to help the girls there find a way out. Every girl deserves a life as bright and beautiful as a flower. Not to be branded as guilty at birth simply for being female, to be snuffed out in the cradle like a tender sprout. That same year, my mom and Dr. Miller got married. Dr. Miller became my stepfather. Now I had one more person to spoil me. The following spring, my mom got pregnant. A 39-year-old high-risk pregnancy. I was more nervous than she was. Whenever I had a break from school, I would rush home, terrified my mom might have an accident. Dr. Miller treated my mom wonderfully, like a queen. Perhaps because of her past, my mom was a little scared. She often told my stepfather in front of me, "I'm risking my life to have this baby at my age. I only have 2 conditions. First, you have to treat the baby the same whether it's a boy or a girl. Second, even after we have our own child, you can't treat my Grace any differently." Dr. Miller was 3 years older than my mom, a gentle and kind man with a warm, sincere smile. His first wife had passed away years ago, and he had never remarried or had children. He was overjoyed to become a father in his 40s and agreed to everything my mom said with a "Yes, dear, of course." The way he looked at her was pure adoration. In contrast, I heard more stories about my real parents. Their family had become infamous in the city. Infamous for raising the most monstrously spoiled child imaginable. He had caused trouble his whole life, and at 18 he landed himself in prison. We didn't pry into the details, but we knew my biological parents were so distraught their hair turned white overnight, and their business collapsed. When my mom heard this, she frowned. "Grace, those people have always been so unreasonable. What if they get desperate and come after you again?" I gently touched my mom's growing belly. "Don't worry about it, just focus on the baby. I'm not that helpless little girl anymore. I'm an adult now. I'm not afraid of them. Besides, we have Dad now." At the mention of her husband, my mom blushed slightly. "You're right, Grace." Like my mom, I had no warm feelings for my biological parents and was always worried they would pull some stunt. Especially during such a critical time for my mom. I was scared they would cause trouble and hurt her. On New Year's Day, a time for family reunions and celebration, my mom and I were at the hospital again. Because my mom was in labor. My stepfather was so nervous his forehead was beaded with sweat. He kept muttering medical jargon under his breath and grabbing every nurse who passed by to ask questions. The nurses just laughed. "Dr. Miller, you're a doctor yourself. You know childbirth takes time. The patient is stable, don't worry so much." Just as they were talking, my mom gave birth. A loud, clear cry echoed from the room. A moment later, a doctor came out. She delivered. "It's a boy, 8 pounds 2 ounces. My little brother was a very good baby." It was as if he knew how much his mother had gone through at her age to bring him into the world. So he repaid her by being quiet and content. He was a smiley baby who slept soundly through the night and didn't fuss much during the day. Just like that, my mom went from being a single mother with a burden to a woman in a happy, loving family with a son in her later years and a daughter by her side. My mom would often boast to my stepfather, "Honey, everything we have is thanks to Grace. She's our little lucky star." From the moment I met her. She must have said it 1,000 times. My stepfather always listened patiently, never tiring of her stories. He even started to believe that his own son was born thanks to my good fortune. One time he said, "Your mom's right, Grace is a lucky star. If you hadn't insisted on dragging your mom to the hospital to get her eyes checked, I never would have met her." When he said it, his eyes shone as he looked at me. Those two were so sweet they often made me blush, and I'd have to retreat to my room with a book. During winter break of my junior year, I took the train home. I was in a hurry to get back and could only get a late-night ticket. By the time I arrived, it was 2 in the morning. Thinking about how my parents were older now and had a toddler to look after, I didn't tell them when I was arriving. I planned to just grab a taxi home with my small bag. But as I was leaving the train station, I saw a man walking toward me. He walked with a limp, and his clothes were filthy. It was an unsettling sight. I frowned and tried to move away, but he suddenly lunged forward and grabbed my arm. "Grace, it's me, your dad." I hadn't had any contact with my biological parents for years. But our city was small, and my aunt was a gossip, so I had heard things about them. My biological brother, the one hailed as a lucky star at birth, had blinded a classmate at age 3 and had only become more of a monster since. He was a terrible student who loved to fight and show off his parents' money. When he was a teenager, he demanded they buy him a car. He argued that some kid named Mark in his class had won and was super cool, surrounded by girls despite being ugly. His parents refused and tried to reason with him, explaining he wasn't even old enough to drive and it was dangerous. But he just scoffed at them. "You've been telling me my whole life I'm a lucky star sent from heaven. You think the same rules apply to me?" Back then, car regulations weren't as strict. My biological father actually got his precious son a car. A few days later, he hit someone. As fate would have it, the accident happened on his 18th birthday, meaning he had to face the criminal charges as an adult. His family had no money to settle out of court, so he spent 2 years in prison. When he got out, he was lazy and entitled, constantly demanding his parents find him a job. But by then, his parents had exhausted all their savings. Where would they find the money to get him a job? That's when they turned their attention to me and my family. "Grace, he's your brother, your own flesh and blood. You can't be so heartless. He's the only one who can carry on our family name." The man was only in his 40s but looked 60. His clothes were grimy, and one of his pant legs was frayed from dragging on the ground. I gently pulled my arm away from his grasp and shook my head. "I'm sorry, my last name is Show. I was a newborn when they tried to kill me, so I have no memory of it." But the villager's words had reached me over the years, piercing my small body like 1,000 needles. My head was nearly crushed flat. Even when I was 4 or 5, my mom would anxiously check my head, terrified of some underlying injury. She even took me for several brain scans. I knew that was my birth mother's doing. And on my inner thigh, there are 2 small, crescent-shaped scars like 2 fingernails. I knew my birth mother had pinched me there right after I was born. And I do remember when I was 4, how they kicked down our door and ripped that $8,000 from my mom's hands. They were never there when I was sick. It was my mom who carried me to the village's barefoot doctor. They never worried about my schooling. In 2nd grade, I cried because there was a word I couldn't read. My mom, who had little education, couldn't read it either. But she sat with a dictionary, searching character by character, comforting me. "Don't cry, Grace, mommy's here." How could they call themselves my parents? How could this man have the nerve to call that boy my brother? But as soon as the words left my mouth, the man shot out a hand and grabbed my wrist. You ungrateful little brat, don't blame me for what happens next. A large van pulled up from behind, and 3 men started dragging me toward it. It was late, and the street was empty. In those days, there were very few security cameras. I tried to scream, but they clamped a hand over my mouth. I kicked and fought, but they slapped me hard across the face twice. I twisted my head and saw the man I was supposed to call father, glaring at me, his eyes bloodshot. I gave you life, and now it's time you paid me back. I had just noticed the van had out-of-state plates. I suddenly remembered the recent news reports about human trafficking. I heard 2 of the men behind me say, "This one's a real catch, Lou. The boss will give you a bonus." The man's eyes lit up. An extra 3,000? Suddenly, I was filled with despair. Just when I thought it was all over, I heard a powerful voice cry out, "Who's there? What's going on?" I recognized the voice and struggled with all my might. Finally breaking free from the hand over my mouth, I screamed, "Mom, help me." My mom always said I was her lucky star. That without me, she would have died long ago. But really, my mom was my lucky star. When I was born and nearly killed, she was the one who saved me. She raised me through hardship, even turning against her own family for my sake. At 20 years old, she had the courage to get a divorce, something unheard of in that era. Her selfless love was the fuel that drove me to learn and grow. Even though I grew up in a single-parent, adopted family, I never once felt like an outsider, or that I lacked love. I am confident and beautiful, and I have the courage to chase my dreams. I have a grateful heart and a desire to give back to society. All of this is because I have a wonderful mother, even if she isn't my biological mother. The bond of nurture is stronger than blood. To give birth without raising a child is the height of irresponsibility. It would be better not to have given birth at all. My mom later told me that she couldn't sleep that night. Her mind was filled with news reports she had seen about women being abducted. I just kept thinking, my Grace is so beautiful, she won a modeling competition at 18. People must have their eyes on her. I was watching TV at home and started to panic. I calculated that you should be getting home today, so I rushed out to the station to wait for you. The only explanation I have for it is a mother's intuition. My mom's love for me, her constant worry, gave her a sixth sense that brought her to me in my most desperate moment. My stepfather, worried about my mom's poor eyesight at night, had come with her to the station. They had tried calling me several times, but the calls wouldn't go through. That's when they knew something was wrong and started searching the area around the station, even calling a few friends for help. And that's how they found me, just as I was about to be taken. The next day, we were on the news. The headline read, "A mother's great love. Mom rescues daughter at train station on a hunch. Helps police bust state's largest trafficking ring." What the news didn't mention was the $20,000 reward. My biological father went to prison. Because of this, my biological mother and brother came to our house to cause a scene. But thanks to the news coverage, our story had spread throughout the neighborhood. When the neighbors saw them show up, they chased them away. Our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Nelson, yelled at my biological mother for a solid half hour, a continuous stream of insults without a single curse word, until the woman's face was pale. Later, when my stepfather was transferred for work, my mom and I moved to a bigger city, completely cutting ties with that family for good. By the time I was 23, I graduated with honors and was accepted into the master's program at Stanford, making my parents even prouder. My little brother, however, had it tough. He was in elementary school by then, and my parents constantly used me as an example, which lit a fire under him from the first grade. I found out during a heart-to-heart that my brother had a great dream: to surpass his sister. I'm going to get better grades than my sister and go to a better school. I'm going to be stronger than mom and gentler than dad. I gently pinched his chubby cheek. Well then, you'd better work hard. But there was one thing my parents were still very worried about: my love life. At 26, I graduated with my master's and was accepted into a PhD program, and I still hadn't been on a single date. I didn't care at all. I had a dream to pursue, knowledge to gain, and a contribution to make to society. I had already contacted a self-built school in a remote village and planned to become its principal as soon as I finished my PhD. But my parents were frantic. They rallied all their relatives, friends, and even my dad's patients to set me up on blind dates. I dodged them all. I had zero interest in romance. As they say on the internet, a man would only slow me down. But when Becca got married, I went to her wedding and met a guy there. He walked up to me, blushing, his white shirt smelling of my favorite scent, lemon. "Grace, my name is Kevin. I just got out of the army. I'm 6'1", 155 pounds. And I work for the Criminal Investigation Department. Becca is my cousin. I've heard her talk about you a lot." He rattled it all off in one breath, practically giving me his entire family history. Finally, he looked up. His eyes were bright, filled with the earnest, clear gaze of a young man. "I'd like to ask you out. They say even the strongest woman can't resist a persistent man." I finally understood what that meant. From my first year as a PhD student to my third, he never gave up. When I went to be a principal in that village, he took on a case no one else wanted, just to follow me out there. By the time I was 30, I sent off the first batch of kids from my school to universities across the country. A few of them were girls whose families had tried to stop their education, whom I had personally sponsored. As I looked at their excited, hopeful faces, a weight lifted from my heart. I turned and saw Kevin, who had been by my side the whole time, and smiled. "Kevin, how about we start dating?" So at 31, I got married. At 32, thanks to my contributions to the school and the publicity from the girls who had graduated, the school became famous. After gaining national attention, it was taken over by the government, renovated, and staffed with highly qualified teachers. As the locals said, "This place has come back to life." When the school was reorganized, I didn't stay. My parents were getting older, and Kevin's job required him to transfer back. Though my heart ached for those in need, I couldn't neglect the people right beside me. My mother had sacrificed so much to raise me, I needed to repay her. Kevin had waited for me for years, I needed to be a wife to him. A university offered me a lecturer position, so I returned to Houston. At 33, I got pregnant. The ultrasound showed twins. When my mom heard, she frowned. "Twins. That's going to be tough." But I had always been healthy and had kept up with my exercise. The two babies in my belly seemed to be well behaved, and the pregnancy was relatively easy. 10 months later, I gave birth to two chubby, healthy baby girls. My family was ecstatic. "Little sweethearts and a matching set," Kevin said, holding one in each arm, smiling like the young man I first met. While we were joyfully welcoming our new arrivals, we heard a fight break out in the next bed. "We fed you and took care of you for 10 months, and you give me a worthless girl." A harsh, angry voice snapped. It was a middle-aged woman. "Our family doesn't raise freeloaders. I say we just dump her, or find someone to take her," a young man's voice added. I turned and saw a pale-faced woman lying in the next bed, clearly exhausted from childbirth. Next to her stood a woman in her 50s or 60s, holding a swaddled baby. She held the infant with such resentment that the baby was crying non-stop. The young man was presumably the new mother's husband. He stood there with a long face, looking at his wife like she had personally wronged him. "What's wrong with a girl? Girls are wonderful. What century are you living in? Still thinking you need a son to take care of you in your old age? Daughters are the ones who will truly care for you." My mom's shout cut through the argument. I saw the new mother, who had been looking down with a pale face, suddenly lift her head, her eyes shining. "Exactly," my dad chimed in. He clearly wasn't used to arguing, but he backed my mom up. My husband was even more impressive. He stood up and pulled his police badge out of his pocket. "I'm a police officer. Did I just hear you talking about killing someone?" The family's faces went white. But my mom and I had been through this. We knew a few sharp words wouldn't change their deep-seated beliefs. "Look at you with two useless girls. What bad luck. Treating a girl like she's some kind of treasure. We don't want a girl. If you're so high and mighty, why don't you take her?" The man grumbled resentfully. "Fine. If you're willing to give her up, let's get the adoption papers started," I said, looking at the woman in the bed. "But that's a decision for the baby's mother to make." The new mother was stunned for a moment. Then she bit her lip, shook her head, and looked at her husband and mother-in-law. A divorce. As soon as I'm recovered, we're getting a divorce. I'll raise my baby myself. Seeing this, my mom and I both gave the woman a thumbs up. Good for her. In some ways, the world can be unkind to women, which is why we must be strong, independent, and clear-headed. We have to be responsible for ourselves, for those we love, and for those who love us. And sometimes, a small act of kindness can change another person's entire life. It can save them. Sometimes, fortune and misfortune are intertwined, and no one knows how things will end. All we can do is our best. Do good deeds, and don't ask about the future. The end.